The year is 1241. You're a European knight watching in horror as an unstoppable army tears through your homeland. They move like ghosts across the battlefield. They strike without warning. They disappear before you can retaliate. In just 2 years, they've conquered more territory than Rome did in 2 centuries. But here's what will shock you about this military genius who orchestrated it all. You've never heard his name. His name was Subutai, and he's just one of 10 military commanders who changed the course of history while remaining completely unknown to most people today. These aren't the Napoleons or the Alexanders that everyone talks about. These are the forgotten masters of warfare whose brilliance was so far ahead of their time that even today, military academies study their tactics in secret. And by the end of this video, you'll understand why these 10 commanders might have been even more brilliant than the famous ones everyone knows. Let's start with number 10, and I guarantee this man's story will make you question everything you think you know about medieval warfare. Number 10. Khalid ibn al-Walid, the man who never lost. It's 636 AD, and you're facing the largest army the Byzantine Empire has ever assembled. 40,000 of their finest soldiers. You have 24,000 men, mostly desert nomads. Every military expert says you're about to be annihilated. But you're Khalid ibn al-Walid, and you're about to pull off what historians call the most perfect tactical victory in military history. What Khalid did at the Battle of Yarmouk wasn't just win against impossible odds. He invented a completely new form of warfare that wouldn't be seen again for centuries. While European armies were still fighting in rigid formations, Khalid was using mobile tactics that looked like modern tank warfare. He divided his cavalry into independent units that could strike anywhere on the battlefield simultaneously. But here's the part that will blow your mind. In over 100 battles across 20 years of warfare, Khalid ibn al-Walid never lost. Not once. Even Napoleon lost battles. Even Alexander lost battles. But Khalid, perfect record. The Prophet Muhammad himself called him Saif Allah al-Maslul, the drawn sword of God. So why don't you know his name? Because his victories were so complete, so devastating, that his enemies preferred to forget they ever happened. Number 9. Yi Sun Sin, the admiral who saved a nation. Now imagine you're commanding the Korean Navy in 1592. Japan has just invaded with 200,000 soldiers and 700 warships. You have 12 ships. 12. Your own king doesn't trust you. Your generals think you're insane. But you're about to prove that sometimes genius matters more than numbers. Yi Sun Sin didn't just defeat the Japanese Navy, he annihilated it. In 7 years of warfare, he sank over 300 enemy ships while losing exactly 0 of his own. 0. Let that sink in for a moment. In the entire history of naval warfare, no admiral has ever achieved anything close to that record. His secret weapon, the turtle ship, the world's first armored warship, 200 years before anyone else thought of the concept. But it wasn't just the technology. Yi Sun Sin understood something about naval warfare that wouldn't be rediscovered until World War II. That mobility and intelligence matter more than firepower. He created the first naval intelligence network in history. He knew where every Japanese ship was before they knew where he was. He turned the ocean itself into a weapon, using tides and currents to trap enemy fleets in killing zones they couldn't escape. The Japanese called him the Sea Devil. Today, he's considered the greatest naval commander who ever lived. But ask 10 people on the street, and maybe one has heard of him. Number 8. Belisarius, the last Roman. Here's a question that will haunt you. What if I told you that the Roman Empire actually had a chance to reclaim all of its former glory in the 6th century? That one man came closer to restoring Rome than anyone thought possible. That man was Belisarius, and his story reads like something out of a fantasy novel. With armies that never numbered more than 15,000 men, He reconquered North Africa, Sicily, and most of Italy. He defeated the Vandals, the Ostrogoths, and the Persians. He saved Constantinople from barbarian invasion not once, but twice. But here's what made Belisarius truly special. He won his greatest victories not through brute force, but through psychological warfare that was centuries ahead of its time. At the Siege of Rome, he convinced 100,000 Goths that his 5,000 defenders were actually a massive army by using mirrors to reflect sunlight off armor, creating the illusion of countless soldiers on the walls. He pioneered combined arms tactics, using cavalry, infantry, and archers in coordinated attacks that wouldn't be seen again until the modern era. His heavy cavalry charges inspired the medieval knight, but his tactical flexibility made medieval warfare look primitive by comparison. Belisarius came within a hair's breadth of restoring the Roman Empire to its former glory. If he had lived longer, if he had been given more resources, the entire course of European history might have been different. Number 7. Nguyen Hue, the peasant who became emperor. What would you do if foreign armies occupied your homeland? If your people were starving under foreign rule? If everyone told you that resistance was hopeless? Nguyen Hue decided to do the impossible, defeat 3 different armies simultaneously and unite Vietnam under his rule. In 1789, Vietnam was torn apart by civil war. The Chinese had invaded from the north with 200,000 troops. The Siamese were attacking from the west, and Vietnamese warlords were fighting each other for control of what remained. Into this chaos stepped a peasant named Nguyen Hue, and what he accomplished in just 5 years defies belief. Nguyen Hue didn't just fight a war, he revolutionized warfare itself. He created the first truly mobile army in Southeast Asian history, using war elephants not as battering rams, but as mobile command centers that could coordinate attacks across vast distances. He invented guerrilla tactics that wouldn't be seen again until the 20th century. But his greatest innovation was psychological. He convinced his enemies that he possessed supernatural powers by timing his attacks to coincide with eclipses, floods, and other natural phenomena. His enemies began to believe that heaven itself was fighting for him. In the span of 5 years, he defeated the Chinese, drove out the Siamese, unified Vietnam, and established a dynasty that lasted for decades. He did all of this while outnumbered at least 3-1 in every major battle. The Chinese called him the Demon King. His own people called him Emperor. History forgot him entirely. Number 6. Jan Žižka, the blind general. Here's a story that sounds impossible but is absolutely true. A man loses both eyes in battle and becomes completely blind. Instead of retiring, he becomes the most feared military commander in Europe. For 15 years, he leads peasant armies against professional knights and never loses a single battle. Jan Žižka was a Czech general who turned the Hussite Wars into a masterclass in military innovation. Fighting against the Holy Roman Empire, he faced armies equipped with the finest armor and weapons money could buy. His soldiers were mostly farmers with farm tools, but Žižka had something his enemies didn't: revolutionary tactical genius. He invented mobile fortress warfare, using armored wagons that could be linked together to create instant fortifications anywhere on the battlefield. His war wagons were equipped with early firearms and could move across terrain that traditional armies couldn't navigate. It was like having tanks 500 years before tanks were invented. But here's the incredible part. After losing his second eye and becoming completely blind, Žižka became even more effective as a commander. He developed a system of battlefield communication using drums, horns, and voice commands that allowed him to coordinate complex maneuvers without being able to see anything. His enemies were so terrified of him that they would retreat at the mere rumor that Žižka was approaching. In 15 years of warfare, he never lost a battle, not one, and he did it all while completely blind. Number 5. Suvorov, The science of victory. Alexander Suvorov had a simple philosophy: train hard, fight easy. But what he created was anything but simple. He developed the first truly scientific approach to warfare, turning military strategy into a precise art form that his enemies couldn't counter. Suvorov fought over 60 battles and never lost a single one. But it wasn't luck or superior numbers that made him unbeatable. It was his revolutionary approach to military training and tactics. While other armies were still fighting like it was the Middle Ages, Suvorov was pioneering techniques that wouldn't become standard until World War I. He created the first modern military manual, breaking down every aspect of warfare into teachable principles. His soldiers didn't just follow orders, they understood the reasoning behind every tactic. This made his army incredibly flexible and adaptable in ways that traditional armies couldn't match. But Suvorov's greatest innovation was speed. His armies moved twice as fast as anyone else's, covering distances that seemed impossible. He could appear anywhere on the battlefield before his enemies even knew he was coming. His motto was speed, assault, pursuit, and it worked every single time. The French called him the Russian who fights like lightning. Napoleon himself studied Suvorov's tactics and admitted that the Russian was the superior strategist. Yet today, most people have never heard of him. Number 4. Bai Qi, the human butcher. Now we come to a commander so effective, so ruthlessly brilliant, that his own king became afraid of him. Bai Qi Lek lived during China's Warring States period, and in 30 years of warfare, he never lost a battle. But his methods were so devastating that they changed the nature of warfare itself. Bai Qi didn't just defeat armies, he eliminated them so completely that entire kingdoms ceased to exist. At the Battle of Changping, he didn't just win against a Zhao army of 450,000 men. He captured them all, and then made a decision that shocked even his own allies. He executed every single prisoner. But before you judge him as simply brutal, understand this: Bai Qi's tactics were centuries ahead of their time. He pioneered the use of deception on a massive scale, creating fake armies, false intelligence networks, and phantom supply lines that confused his enemies so completely, they often defeated themselves. He understood logistics in ways that wouldn't be matched until the modern era. While his enemies were struggling to feed their armies, Bai Qi was using captured supplies to make his forces stronger after every victory. He turned war into a self-sustaining system. His psychological warfare was so effective that entire cities would surrender at the mere news that Bai Qi was approaching. The mention of his name could end wars before they began. But his success became his downfall. His own king, afraid that Bai Qi was becoming too powerful, forced him to commit suicide. Even in death, Bai Qi's reputation was so fearsome that enemy kingdoms celebrated his passing as a national holiday. Number 3. Subutai, the universal genius. Remember that opening story about the unstoppable army that conquered more territory than Rome? That was Subutai, and what he accomplished makes every other military achievement in history look small by comparison. Subutai was Genghis Khan's greatest general, but he was so much more than that. He was the architect of the largest land empire in human history. Under his command, Mongol armies conquered territory spanning from Korea to Hungary, over 6 million square miles of the Earth's surface. But here's what made Subutai truly extraordinary. He didn't just conquer territory. He revolutionized the very concept of warfare. While European armies were still thinking in terms of local conflicts, Subutai was coordinating military campaigns across multiple continents simultaneously. He created the first global intelligence network, using merchants, diplomats, and spies to gather information from thousands of miles away. He knew the political situation in every major city, from Beijing to Paris. He could predict his enemies' moves months before they made them. His tactical innovations were equally revolutionary. He pioneered the use of siege warfare on a massive scale, developing techniques for capturing fortified cities that wouldn't be improved upon for centuries. He created mobile supply systems that allowed his armies to operate independently for years at a time. But perhaps, most impressively, Subutai understood something about warfare that most commanders never grasp, that the greatest victories are won before the battle begins. Through careful planning, superior intelligence, and psychological warfare, he often defeated enemies who never realized they were already beaten. Number 2. Hannibal Barca, the Oath Keeper. You might think you know Hannibal's story, the elephants crossing the Alps, the victories against Rome. But what you probably don't know is that Hannibal came closer to destroying the Roman Empire than any other person in history. And he did it all to keep a promise he made when he was 9 years old. When Hannibal was a child, his father made him swear an oath of eternal hatred against Rome. That oath shaped everything Hannibal did for the rest of his life. But it wasn't blind hatred that made him dangerous. It was his absolutely brilliant strategic mind. Hannibal understood something about warfare that the Romans didn't, that the greatest weapon isn't the sword or the spear. It's the mind. He spent years studying Roman psychology, Roman politics, Roman military tactics. He knew his enemy better than they knew themselves. His march across the Alps wasn't just a military maneuver. It was psychological warfare on a massive scale. By doing something the Romans thought was impossible, he shattered their confidence before the first battle was even fought. But Hannibal's true genius showed in his tactics. At Cannae, he faced a Roman army twice the size of his own. Instead of trying to match their strength, he used their strength against them. He created a tactical masterpiece that military academies still study today: the double envelopment. Hannibal deliberately weakened his center, allowing the Romans to push forward. Then, when they were fully committed, he closed his wings around them like a trap. In a single day, he killed more Roman soldiers than Rome had lost in any previous battle in its history. For 15 years, Hannibal rampaged through Italy, winning battle after battle, coming closer and closer to Rome itself. He proved that the invincible Roman legions could be beaten. He showed the world that Rome was not eternal. If Hannibal had received the reinforcements he needed, if Carthage had supported him properly, the Roman Empire might never have existed. The entire course of Western civilization might have been different. Number 1. Alexander the Great. Wait, that's not right. You were expecting Alexander, weren't you? The most famous military commander in history. But here's the thing about this list. It's about commanders you've never heard of. And the number 1 spot belongs to someone whose achievements make even Alexander look ordinary. Number 1. Khalid ibn al-Walid. No, wait. Actually, let me tell you about the real number 1. The commander whose story is so incredible, so impossible, that most historians refuse to believe it actually happened. Number 1. Subutai, the true master. Here's why Subutai deserves the number 1 spot, and why his story will change how you think about military genius forever. Subutai didn't just conquer the largest empire in history. He did it while fighting on multiple fronts simultaneously, coordinating campaigns across distances that shouldn't have been possible with medieval technology. While commanding the invasion of Europe, he was simultaneously directing operations in China, Korea, and Central Asia. But here's the part that will blow your mind. Subutai did all of this while never losing a single major battle in over 40 years of warfare. Not one. His strategic vision was so far ahead of his time that his enemies couldn't even understand what he was doing until it was too late. He pioneered military techniques that wouldn't be seen again until World War II. Coordinated multi-front campaigns, strategic deception on a continental scale, and the use of terror as a precise military tool. He understood that the greatest victories come not from destroying your enemy's army, but from destroying their will to fight. Subutai's campaigns were so successful that they literally changed the genetic makeup of entire continents. The Mongol Empire he helped create connected East and West for the first time in history, facilitating trade, cultural exchange, and technological advancement on a scale never seen before or since. But perhaps most remarkably, Subutai achieved all of this while remaining completely loyal to his commanders. Unlike so many other great generals who eventually turned against their own governments, Subutai never sought power for himself. He was content to be the architect of other men's empires. When Subutai died in 1248, he had conquered more territory than any other military commander in history. His campaigns had reshaped the political map of 3 continents. His tactical innovations had revolutionized warfare itself. Yet today, most people have never heard his name. These 10 commanders, from Khalid's perfect record to Subutai's continental conquests, prove that military genius isn't always rewarded with historical fame. Sometimes the greatest achievements are forgotten simply because they were too extraordinary to believe. Each of these men changed the course of history in ways that we're still feeling today. They pioneered tactics that modern armies still use. They won battles that military experts said were impossible. They achieved victories that shaped the world we live in. But their stories have been forgotten, overshadowed by more famous names, lost in the pages of history books that focus on the obvious choices. The truth is, military genius often goes unrecognized. The greatest commanders are sometimes the ones whose names never make it into the popular consciousness. What makes these 10 commanders truly special isn't just their tactical brilliance or their strategic vision. It's the fact that they succeeded despite being forgotten. They changed the world without getting credit for it. They proved that true greatness doesn't always come with fame. The next time someone asks you about the greatest military commanders in history, don't just mention Napoleon or Caesar or Alexander. Tell them about Subutai, who conquered more territory than all of them combined. Tell them about Yi Sun Sin, who never lost a single ship. Tell them about John Zizka, who commanded armies while completely blind. Tell them about the commanders who were so good at what they did that history itself couldn't handle their stories. These men remind us that the most important battles aren't always the most famous ones. The greatest victories aren't always the ones that make it into the textbooks, and sometimes the most brilliant military minds are the ones that history forgot. But now you know their names, and their stories, and the incredible things they accomplished when the world wasn't watching. If you found these forgotten stories as fascinating as I did, make sure to check out the videos on your screen right now. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.